All right, guys, so let's talk about these raids. And yes, I'm going to give you all the information you're going to need for Riff raids in the next few minutes. Now, as we look at the map, yes, we're going to talk about each of these nodes and the Sentinel nodes. I'm going to give you a breakdown of every team I used, all the characters I used, and who's available in case you don't have them. But before we look at each of these Sentinels, let's just do a recap real quick. All right, so here's your team setup. You got 3 slots. Each slot is going to have different traits, whether they're bonus like you see right here with the green, or they're required just like the blue right here. Now, it doesn't matter which one's in the center because now, well, we can move that leader around and start with whatever character we want. But it's going to be very important to notice these bonuses because that's what you're going to need to do, especially when you're punching up. Now, lastly, as I take you through all of this, I am looking at tier 13. And yes, I don't have the double restrictions yet, but the way this worked, every single tier, it ended up being the exact same traits. We just had different bonuses and restrictions as we went. Last caveat before we jump into everything, this was a test and I can't guarantee today's Riff raids are going to have the exact same Sentinels, but if they do, here's a list of what I did and maybe that'll help you out. All right, so the first Sentinel we're going to look at is Oogie Boogie, and for each of these Sentinels, they're going to have one trait that everything kind of revolves around, and for Oogie Boogie, that's going to be Goofball. Now, if you look at the traits that are going to be needed on each of the slots for Oogie Boogie, now keep in mind this is tier 13 with a playtest that we were doing. In slot 1, you're going to have Shape-Shifting and Goofball. Slot 2 is going to be Goofball and Tank. Slot 3 is going to be Scary and Tall. Now the blue one means it's required and the green one means it's just a bonus. Eventually, as we get further into the tiers, both of these are going to be required, so keep that in mind for future Sentinels as well. So in slot 1 we have Stitch, Wally, Oogie Boogie, and Genie. Slot 2 we have Wally, Oogie Boogie, Baloo, Simba, and Genie. In slot 3, we have Oogie Boogie, Zurg, Maleficent, Jack Skellington, Sully, and Ursula. So you'll notice that we have overlaps with characters that are being needed on multiple of these, so you need to think about that with your entire team composition. Now, I'm going to go through every team I used within the playtest. That way you guys know this is what worked and what teams that I felt were pretty strong. In slot 1, I have Wally. Slot 2, I had Simba. In slot 3, I had Zurg. So Zurg did all my damage while Wally and Simba just kind of tanked and kept people away from me. Next up, we have Maleficent. Now, Maleficent is all about the villainous. In her 3 slots, she has a Villainous Scary, Villainous Shape-Shifting, and Fortune Seeker Villainous. Slot 1, we have Ursula, Scar, Oogie Boogie, Evil Queen, Maleficent, and Zurg. In slot 2, we have Ursula, Scar, Maleficent, and Oogie Boogie. And in the 3rd slot, well, we have one. It's Oogie Boogie. So with my picks in slot 1, I have Zurg. Zurg is one of my favorite characters when it comes to Riff raids and his damage, so we're sticking with Zurg here. Slot 2, we have Oogie Boogie. Now I know this sounds a little weird, but for now, because we're not required in both of our slots, I'm going to put Oogie Boogie here, which means the 3rd slot, well, we're going a little different. We're going with Scrooge. And yes, Scrooge is not villainous, but he is Fortune Seeker, which is the required trait right here, so we can pump up that damage from Zurg and take down these nodes a lot easier. Now in higher tiers, once this becomes required, Oogie Boogie will go here. In that middle slot, well, I'll have to figure out what I'm going to do. I don't really like many of the characters that are in that particular slot, but maybe I go with Ursula for double tank, or maybe I go with Maleficent just to get another range to stick in there. For now, this is the team that I used, and yeah, it worked very, very well. Next up is Snow White, and Snow White's royalty. Her 3 slots are going to be Tall and Royalty, Royalty and Melee, Royalty and Support. So in slot 1, Tall and Royalty, we only have one choice, and it's Skelly. Now, I know a lot of people don't have Skelly, but the good news is he is coming, or at least we assume he's coming at the end of October based on the event schedule that they put out. Next up in slot 2, we have Scar, Rapunzel, Anna, Snow White, and Ariel. And for that 3rd slot, we have Belle, Tiana, and Evil Queen. So for the 1st slot, well, we're going with Jack Skelly. We have them. We're going to use them. Luckily, that requirement's just tall, so there's a lot of guardians that can be used in that slot until way later in the higher tiers. For slot 2, I'm going with my damage dealer Ariel because, yeah, she's so good when it comes to royalty, and she's going to do a lot of damage. Lastly, in that 3rd slot, well, I don't really want these characters, so I'm going to put Simba in there for now, just to give me a little bit of tanking to be able to punch up a little bit more on this space. But I think Tiana's probably my go-to if I wasn't doing something like that. Next up is Scrooge, and Scrooge is high tech. Scrooge and Gaston, who we'll talk about in a second, are 2 of the harder Sentinels on our map that we were using because they had more nodes. So if you haven't seen the other videos around Riff Raid stuff, make sure to check them out. But essentially each of these Sentinels is going to have multiple nodes attached to them, and with every single node that's attached to them, they're going to have more health. In the Riff Raid we were running, Scrooge and Gaston had 6 nodes attached to them, so they were beefy boys and they took a lot to take down. So the trait slots for Scrooge are going to be lawful and high tech and gravity defying, high tech and range. So in slot 1 we have Baymax, Mr. Incredible, Buzz, Judy Hopps, Minnie, Sully, and Tron. In slot 2 we have Hero, Goofy, Eve, Buzz, and Zurg. For slot 3 we have Judy, Tron, Goofy, Eve, Buzz, and Zurg. So in slot 1 I went with Mr. Incredible. Slot 2 we went with Hero. In slot 3 I went with Zurg. Now when I was controlling these, I was usually just using Zurg as my main damage dealer and just letting Mr. Incredible do what he does. Another option would have been using something like Baymax in the first slot just to give you more shields and maybe an actual tank compared to Mr. Incredible, who just does a lot of damage. I think either way this team works. Even if you want to control Mr. Incredible, Zurg's going to lay down some fire in the back, so it'll work out that way as well. Lastly, we have Gaston, and Gaston is leader. So in his 3 slots, we have short fuse and leader, leader and lawful, and leader and ranged. So for slot 1, we have Mr. Incredible, Hook, Gaston, Hades, and Woody. For slot 2, we have Mickey, Elsa, Mulan, Buzz, Mr. Incredible, Sully, and Woody. In slot 3, we have Elsa, Buzz, Maleficent, Gaston, and Hades. So for this one, in slot 1, I have Mr. Incredible. Slot 2, I have Mickey. In slot 3, I went with Hero. Hero's leader. Yes, he's not ranged, but honestly, I just wanted to make sure that I could take down the bigger nodes because Gaston has all of those minion nodes attached to him, and you really got to punch up, or you got to take down a bunch of minion nodes, which in some cases may be wasting some energy if you know you can put in a better character. Once we get into the higher tiers of the Riff Raid, I may have to actually use both of these traits because they'll be required. In that case, I'm probably going to use Buzz just for that stun and the damage he's going to be able to do. All right, guys. So now that we went through all the teams, all the Sentinels, you guys get a better idea of what Riff Raids are going to look like and the requirements around them. The Gatekeeper also had requirements each time, but honestly, I just kind of ignored them. I threw in Zurg every time I could, hit that button, just blew him away, and went on about my day. So this is why I feel like Zurg is the MVP of Riff Raids, because he's so good against the Gatekeepers. And as you saw with all these different teams, I was either using Zurg or I was using Bob as my damage dealer, and it worked out pretty nicely. But like I said before at the beginning of the video, these traits could change, these Sentinels could change. Talking to the devs, that is the plan over time, is to have multiple Sentinels, so every time you go in, you get different Sentinels, as well as the traits that are around them. So we saw something like, let's say Oogie Boogie was Goofball. Maybe next time we see him, he's going to be Shapeshifter. It'll change the requirements each time and make it a little more difficult. I like that, and it adds a lot of replayability to the particular mode. And because of that, your roster may need to widen just a little bit, but it's always going to be about working with your alliance, because maybe you have really good high tech, but somebody else has really good goofball. So let them do that Sentinel, you take the other Sentinel, and kind of go from there. It's also going to be really important to make sure that you're going after those minion nodes as well, because like I mentioned, some of these encounters get up to 30k, 40k of what we were seeing. And doing the math, once we get up to tier 30, they're going to have like 100k plus in recommended power, which is going to be impossible. It just means that you need to take down those minion nodes, which are going to weaken the Sentinels to be able to actually take them down. So teamwork is key. Make sure your alliance is, online today. Communication, whether you're calling it out in game or call it out over on Discord, that is how you're going to do well in this mode. But the key thing is have fun. This mode is fun. I had a blast playing it, and I can't wait for tonight. If you guys want to have some fun, hang out with us over on Twitch as we stream our Riff Raid live with special guest and Unstable. So we're going to be hitting it up, all 3 of us doing it. We're going to be on audio and voice so you can hear what we're both doing. And hopefully, if we can get everything working, we're going to be screen sharing so you guys can actually see who's doing what and, live on stream, and we'll flip back and forth and things like that. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So if you're starting with this video, definitely check out the one over here, which is a breakdown of Riff Raids and other stuff around the mode. And yeah, let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you're excited, and if any of these teams you think you would have done differently, leave that down below, because I'm always open to learning about new teams and synergies. so that we can see, test them, practice them, and maybe find new teams. Until next time, guys, y'all take it easy.